Well, hi there, Michael Hausam. Happy Friday, hot summer Friday here in Orange County afternoon to you. So Matt Duncan hired me to sell his house in San Clemente. This is it right here. And we broke the price per foot record for his neighborhood. And then this house here, Mike and Letty hired me to sell their house in Anaheim. We just closed a couple of weeks ago. We got $990,000 for that house. Comps were all in the high 800s. No house had ever in that neighborhood sold as high as that one did. On this one, I actually had to work very hard with the appraiser for them to figure out how to get and justify the value that we agreed to on the purchase price. And then lastly, there's a little map of a neighborhood in Costa Mesa. So in this neighborhood, no agent has sold more houses in the last half dozen years or so than I have. And the sale that we just closed last week in there broke my previous price per foot record that I'd held by almost 8% in a flat market. So the question is, how did all of these things happen? Well, it wasn't just putting a sign out and then negotiating hard, okay? There were 5 very specific strategies that in every single case we put into action well before the homes went onto the market, and then we executed that plan. So this is exactly what I'm going to be covering here today. By the way, when we get to number 5, number 5 is my favorite, and you've probably almost certainly never heard of it. And one other thing is they may feel a little like 5 separate ideas at first, but they actually all work together as one system. So I'm assuming that you're watching this either live or after the fact on YouTube because you have a very specific goal. You want to sell your home for the maximum possible price within the time frame that's right for you. But selling a house isn't like posting something on Facebook Marketplace. When you sell a house, there are obstacles in your way that most people don't even understand, let alone have a unique and effective solution to, okay? Excuse me, a bit struggling with a summer cold. The 5 strategies that I'm going to show you will overcome all of these obstacles. And when you understand them and when you put them into practice, that is when you're going to achieve that goal. And that goal, maximum possible selling price within the time frame that's right for you, I call that selling like a pro. That's what Matt That's what Matt did at his house in San Clemente. That's what the Gomez's did in Anaheim. And that's what multiple families have done right there in Hillcrest in Costa Mesa and many other houses over the years. All of them sold their homes like pros. So my name is Michael Hausam. I'm an active real estate broker in Southern California. And with House Advantage, I do actually 2 things. Number 1, I represent buyers and sellers here in Orange County market as their broker and agent. But then also, I help folks across the country using these exact same systems and strategies so they can buy or sell a house like a pro. And then that way they can work with whatever agent they want to work with, okay? So background quickly for me. I got into the business on the mortgage side about 35 years ago, and then I added the real estate license a decade after that. I'm a top 5 agent in my office, top 3% nationally. So the reason why I bring that up, my bio, none of this here is theory or dated information. This is things that I'm working with every single day. Just before getting on this live stream here, I'm texting with the listing agent, helping buyers buy a house right over by South Coast Plaza. So this is active from the ground stuff that I'm doing literally right now. Now, it used to be, when thinking about selling a house, it used to be that you would hire a realtor, take their advice on pricing it, stick it in the MLS, and the house would sell. Okay, that's what it used to be. In fact, you might even be thinking, Wait, is that not what happens? Well, certainly that's what happens with some people. And in fact, maybe most people. But when you hear me say sell like a pro, it's not what I'm referring to. Or when I say things like that I see home sellers make mistakes every single day that cost them money, that actually is what I'm referring to. Because delegating control over the process and the price and just putting the home on the market is not how pros go about selling a house, and that's not how you get your optimal outcome. The pros play a different game. And what I'm going to be talking to you about here today is how to play a different game. So there's an analogy that I love to use for home selling that should make a lot of sense. Right now, I'm wearing a really nice pair of dress shoes that my wife bought me. Okay, they're under the desk, not going to show them to you, but she picked them out. Okay, she bought them at Nordstrom. Now, she could have actually waited, and at some point, they would have showed up at Nordstrom Rack. And then at some point, she maybe could have actually even found them at a garage sale if the person that bought them didn't like them and never wore them and sold them at the garage sale, okay? Exact same pair of shoes, okay? But what is the difference between all three of those? Nordstrom, Nordstrom Rack, and the garage sale. Well, obviously, first and obvious thing is the price for the shoes would be very different at those three places, even though they're the exact same pair of shoes. So the key question though is why? Why can Nordstrom charge this price, whereas the other two are down here, for the exact same pair of shoes? And the answer to that is positioning. Everything about the sale process, except for the product itself, is totally different when you compare Nordstrom or Nordstrom Rack or a garage sale. Everything about it is different. Nordstrom gets the high-end retail price for those exact same pair of shoes, though, every single day. So what we're going to be discussing today is the real estate version of this. How to do that instead of this or this. And this is for you, by the way. If you already have a realtor, you might be hiring one at some point. If you live in Orange County and you end up talking to me, or you're not going to use a realtor at all. This is for all of you, okay? So over this past week and all the various social media platforms, I have quickly posted and explained the details of these different 5 strategies necessary to sell a home like a pro. Wow. And these are the boots on the ground, tactical things that you have to do to sell a home at a pro level. So let's go through all of these 5 obstacles, the obstacles that are standing in your way, and the strategies to overcome them. Hang with me at the end. You're going to see how they all kind of click together and they all work as one unified system, okay? Each of these solutions overcome the problems that home sellers are confronted with, and they overcome them in a carefully planned way that most sellers and their agents, your competition, never consider. So let's start here. Let's start with number 1. The first obstacle that we need to consider, I call marketplace uncertainty. Okay? The first problem is marketplace uncertainty. This has to do with the buyers that we're hoping to attract to buy your home, okay? In this group, that's the pool of active buyers. This is everyone that could possibly be interested in buying your house. Now, other than the fact that we know that there is a pool of buyers out there, we actually don't know anything else. We don't know how many of them there are. We certainly don't know exactly what they're looking for. We don't know what they're going to think about your house, the things that they're going to love about it or hate it or be indifferent about, the price that they would pay. All of it is uncertainty. So the solution to marketplace uncertainty, I call strategic positioning. So this is the solution. Strategic positioning. Now, what I mean by that is this. Well, think about it this way. Here, I'm going to put you back to full screen. So think about it this way. Remember our Nordstrom rack and garage sale analogy, okay? Nordstrom's presentation of their product is very controlled. You have nice lighting. You have nice displays. It's an extremely comfortable environment. Plus, you've got someone that's going to help you in every possible way to figure out if it's the right size and get socks if you need them, if you want a cup of coffee. They may try to figure out what you're going to be wearing it with and make another suggestion. Super duper helpful in that completely nice environment. Nordstrom Rack, of course, is a very different experience. The shoes are all stacked up in the aisles. You're hoping that the size numbers are correct. And then you got to line up with this helpful adjacent worker to go in the back and find the matching one. And then you're leaning in the aisle up against a wall trying to try the shoe on to see if it fits. And then you got to go snake all the way down to the very end. They throw it in a little plastic bag like you're checking out at a grocery store. At a garage sale, it's even less. It's just thrown out there on the concrete and they may have a little card what it's working for. And that's it, okay? And let me give you, so you understand the positioning differences that help justify the entirety of what Nordstrom Rack, and a garage sale are doing. Let me give you a real world illustration of what the real estate version of this looks like. All right, so this right here, these are the first 3 pictures of a home that recently sold, this was last summer, in Costa Mesa. Okay, these are the first 3 pictures from the MLS. And then these pictures here, this was a listing of mine. Same exact neighborhood, just a couple of streets away. These 2 homes were on the market at the exact same time. So let me show you again. This is the first one, the first 3 pictures. And this is the second one, the first 3 pictures. What do you notice about them? Okay. Now, first thing is I actually had to go 7 pictures into this one here to even find the first interior picture. So let's look at those. So this is actually pictures number 7, 8, and 9 in this array. Okay. So number 7 was the kitchen island. Number 8 was the exact opposite angle. And then number 10 was finally the master bedroom. Okay. So take a look at those 3 pictures, and I want you to hold that in your mind for a quick second. My listing, right around the corner, was a warm, inviting home. The other one is a full-on warehouse. Oh, my stream just died here. So one of these is a warm, inviting home. The other is a full-on warehouse. Now, interestingly, the warm, inviting home, let me just show it to you again to make sure you see it. This house here sold for $80,000 more than this one. Interesting. This house here, this one, the warehouse, there were $200,000 of renovations in this house done right before it hit the market. Also, this house is 40% bigger than this one. And this house, this warm looking one, There hadn't been anything done to that house except for painting on the interior in over a decade. And the kitchen that you actually kind of can't see here, it's off to the left, this top left picture, was basically original. So think about this for a second. This house here really hasn't had anything done to it. This house here had $200,000 done to it. This house here was 40% bigger. Yet this house sold for $80,000 less. Back to our analogy. The warm house, it wasn't perfect, right? The warm house was basically a Target or a Macy's level, but it was positioned higher than the other one. The problem was this house here, the warehouse looking one actually was a Nordstrom level product. $200,000 of work done on it. An extra bedroom, 40% bigger. Everything in it was current and modern. Brand new counters, brand new cabinets, toilets, flooring, everything. The problem was the quality of the pictures, the layout of the photos in the MLS, the fact that it was an empty shell with no staging or no design. And when people showed up, it felt like a warehouse. What they did is they took a Nordstrom level product and they dropped it down to Nordstrom rack or even less. The positioning of that house probably cost those sellers $150,000 or $200,000. There is no way that my listing should have sold for 80 grand more if it was done right and they were following strategy number one. This house did nothing to try to overcome marketplace uncertainty, and they paid the price. My listing applied all of the principles of strategic positioning and hit a total home run. So in this case, actually with the houses, in the Nordstrom shoe analogy, it's all the same product. Nordstrom rack, and the garage sale. We're all talking about the same pair of shoes that I'm wearing, right? In this particular place, the superior product was positioned so poorly that the inferior product actually sold for more. I hope that makes sense about how important understanding marketplace uncertainty is and how positioning can make a complete difference in the result. Now, once we have that one handled, the next problem we have to confront, I call value uncertainty. What is the house actually worth to this current buyer pool, right? So the strategy number one is how the buyer perceives the house and it's positioned. The second obstacle is addressing what they would be actually willing to pay for it. So let's go to problem number 2. I call value uncertainty. Because we have absolutely no idea what anybody in that current buyer pool would be willing to pay for your house. Now, we might have a general idea of the marketplace. In fact, we can have a really good idea of what's been going on in that kind of market niche or the market segment for your house, okay? What has sold, what the prices have been. We can also figure out what's currently on the market, whether they've sold or not, what the asking prices are. Try to figure out how your house is different or maybe the same. But it's still all kind of fuzzy because none of it is your house and none of it is the exact same buyer or seller for the previous comps that we're looking at, right? And on this, anybody that tells you that they have a good idea of what your house is worth is actually just making stuff up. Nobody has any idea what any house is going to sell for other than a broad range. You go into Zillow, you look at your Zestimate, you go down to the bottom, and it's about 10%, right? In Orange County, average price is like $1.2 million. That's a $120,000 swing. Anything more specific than within 10% or so, people are just making things up. And here's the reality. Even the perfect buyer for your house, whoever they are in that buyer pool, they don't actually even know what their final price would be that they would pay until the very, very end. So we've got to overcome this problem. We have got to overcome value uncertainty. And the strategy that I use for this, I call the owner sets the price. So this is solution number 2 to value uncertainty. Owner sets the price. Now, this is kind of a radical suggestion, not the way it's usually done, okay? Switch back to full screen. This is a radical suggestion, and it is not the way that it is usually done. The typical asking price is either suggested or decided upon by the real estate agent. I think you should list it at this or whatever. But I think, this is strategy number 2, you should pick your own asking price, and the agent's job is to then go out and get that price for you. That's their job. Now, the agent does have responsibility prior to that decision though, okay? And that is they should have a system in place for you to help you understand the marketplace, what's been going on with prices and activity, and then to help you see how your house kind of fits within that marketplace. So to educate you, and then once you have a good idea of where your house fits and a good understanding of your own timeline and your wants and needs, then you pick the price. Wow, sorry. Now, there are 2 main reasons why you don't want your realtor picking your home price. Number 1 has to do with incentives. An agent always has the incentive to price the house low. They want to get paid quickly, and they also want to produce a sold in 2 days with multiple offers flyer in a marketing piece or a social media post. Neither of those 2 things, a quick commission and a quick sale, they don't necessarily align with your needs and wants. So that's number 1. Number 2 is competition. Lots of agents will say anything to get you to sign their contract. Hey, wait a second. Somebody told you they could only get whatever price? I can get you 50 grand more than that. You need to hire me. And then there's just a little bit of a game that goes on. All the agents come in and they're trying to figure out a way to tell you something you want to hear or something that you prefer. That may not be aligned with your needs and wants either. So the solution to it is that you pick the price. That's the solution to value uncertainty. Now, after addressing value uncertainty, then the next problem we have to confront is actually getting the attention of your sales team. And who is your sales team? Let's talk about that for a quick second. Your sales team, your sales force, is all of the agents that are out in the marketplace that represent the buyers in your buyer pool. Any buyer that is potentially interested in your house, there's a bunch of agents that are either trying to get them to hire them or they're already hired, okay? So the key, and they're your salespeople. They're the people that are going to be bringing those buyers in. So the problem we have to confront here, I call agent attraction. How do we get the attention of those agents? Strategic positioning, strategy number 1, that was focused on buyers, okay? Problem number 2 is also buyers in terms of their price. This problem number 3 of agent attraction is getting the agents with those buyers to want their buyers to buy your house. So how do you do that? Well, the solution to this is agent incentives. So what's the agent incentive? What can you give an agent? What can you give an agent that would get them to have their buyer interested in your house? Commission. That's what you need to do. Money is the way to get agents to want their buyers in your house. So, I know what you're thinking already about this. So let me ask you a quick question. Who pays that real estate commission? Buyer's agent brings a buyer to your house. Who pays that commission? If your answer is, well, the seller pays it, that's the standard answer, and it's totally incorrect. It's the buyer that pays that commission. The buyer is the only one that's bringing money to the table in the transaction. Think about Nordstrom, that little analogy we were using earlier. If you go to Nordstrom and you spend $100 on a pair of shoes, what you're actually doing is you're actually giving Nordstrom $90 for the shoes and $10 of commission. Now, yes, Nordstrom pays them. It's a Nordstrom check that they get. But they do it with your money. In real estate is the exact same way. The solution to the problem of getting the agent's attention for your house is to give them more of their buyer's money. That's the way I want you to think about it. And what happens out in the marketplace, it is very common today for sellers to negotiate or to counter the commission request from a buyer's agent. An offer comes in and everybody goes, well, the first thing I'm going to have you do is cut your commission rate to try to make the deal work. Don't do that. What that's basically doing is telling the agent to go find a different house, one that's going to pay them more money. Be different than that. Let that agent know that you are happy to build into the price whatever commission rate they want. If they've got a 5% commission agreement, if they've got a 10% commission agreement, great. We're asking $800,000 for the house. We have a 3% commission built in. There's $24,000 in it from you. If you want more than that, you got to build that into the price of the house. Now, it might turn out that their commission rate actually does need to be negotiated, that the numbers aren't going to work, that the buyer's not willing to come up or whatever. And one of the obvious things is negotiating the buyer's agent commission. That may happen. That's absolutely great. But let that conversation happen between them and their buyer client. That's not your hot potato to negotiate that commission. Say, look, if you want this house at this commission rate, you got to pay this. And let them work it out. And they might work it out. They may not work it out. But you are maintaining the incentive to keep them interested in buying your house, because otherwise they're just going to have to go do the same thing with somebody else. Okay? That is the solution to the agent attraction problem, by giving them more of the buyer's money. Okay? We figured out buyer's attention, price it correctly, how to get the buyer agent on board. Now we have obstacle number 4. And I call it the problem of divided loyalty. Problem number 4, divided loyalty. So what I mean by that, who's got your back and how do you know for sure that they have your back? It's a really important question. Imagine you're on a basketball team, okay? And you're in the locker room at halftime. The coach just mapped out your plan for the third quarter, grabs his clipboard, walks out. You watch him walk out of the locker room across the court to the other team. And then he gathers the other team around, pulls out the same clipboard, and then you hear him talk to the other team. Okay, guys, so let me tell you what we're going to be doing for the next quarter. Or you're involved in a lawsuit, right? Somebody's suing you. And you're at some sort of meeting, right? Everybody's sitting at the table and your attorney's sitting there and just explained the facts of your case and demands to the other side, okay? You're all lined up. It's you, your attorney, everybody else. And the attorney just kind of explained everything. And then they get up, walk around the end of the table, sit down next to the other side, look back at you and say, all right, let me tell you what our position is on this and where I think you've got it wrong and what we want to do instead. Would either of these circumstances be okay? Of course not. Yet this happens every single day in real estate. Now, there are a handful of states that this is not allowed. Dual representation or double ending is what it's called. There's a handful of states that don't allow it, but most of them do. And let me give you some insider info. Let me pull back the real estate curtain for you a quick second. If we went in to a sales meeting for any real estate office in the country where they can do dual representation, including my office here in Orange County, just down the 73 in Laguna Niguel. When the manager announces all the sales for the previous week, Mary sold 2 houses, John sold a house, Mike sold a house, the biggest cheers are going to be for the one when somebody represented the buyer and the seller. And Naomi over here sold her listing and also represented the buyer. Everybody is going to cheer louder for Naomi that does that. And do you know why that is? Why is everybody clapping louder for Naomi? Because she sold her listing and also represented the buyer. Do you think it's because everybody is so excited that her client's wishes and intentions were so vigorously defended? Or do you think they're doing it because of the commission and the dollars? What do you think? This right here is my least favorite thing about the real estate business. And in my marketplace here in Orange County, 99% of all agents do it, or they try to do it. And sometimes they're very obvious about it. The problem is 0% of the time is it a good thing for a home seller. The typical agent always has a bunch of reasons why it's great to do it. Hey, look, it's going to save you time. It's going to save you money. It's going to make things so simple for us or whatever. But when you've got an agent who's representing you and somebody else, somebody is getting hosed. Do not allow yourself to be in a position to potentially be the one that gets hosed. If you're going to hire an agent, ask them if they have ever or will they ever be willing to represent the buyer of your home. If they say they would, either don't hire them or don't allow it. The solution to this, you have to insist upon this. Exclusive representation. It's a non-negotiable. So once we've done that, now we got to go on to number 5. The fifth and final problem that you as a seller have to solve. This is the offer environment. Oh, I shouldn't have closed this off. So problem number 5, I call the offer environment. So this is actually an obstacle that you may not even be aware of, okay? And as I describe it to you, my contention is that not only is this a problem, but the solution to this problem is actually one of the single most important strategies to help you achieve your goal of selling like a pro. And what it is this. Background, I should say it this way. Background is nowadays that almost all offers are emailed to the listing agent, who then has a conversation with their seller, and then the seller tells the listing agent what they want to do, and then the listing agent emails a response back to the buyer's agent. This is a huge mistake most of the time, and there is a far better way to do it. Let me ask you this question to help you think through the better way to do it than just emailing. Where does the car dealer want you making the decision about whether or not you want to buy a car? Do they want you at home, on your couch, playing with your phone, flipping through Netflix? Or do they want you in the showroom, right after you just did a test drive, sitting in this perfectly detailed, perfectly smelling car? It's obvious. Not only do they know that you're more likely to actually buy a car that way, you're also more likely to pay more for it. And it's the exact same thing with the house. The ideal place for someone to consider how much they really would pay for your house is sitting in your house. The house that they have probably already imagined is going to be theirs. You want them in what they've already imagined is going to be their new family room or their new kitchen. That's where you want them making that decision. The solution to the problem of the offer environment is doing this offer in person. You do it in person. And it's literally meeting the buyers, their agent, anybody else involved in the transaction in the home and working out the deal right there at the kitchen table on the spot, face to face. And the reason that you want to do this is a big thing, is this is controlling the entire narrative arc of the discussion as well as the process itself. And that's extremely critical. That's the whole point of this. Remember those two houses way back at the beginning, the warm one and the warehouse that I showed you when we were talking about positioning? So when we sold that home, the two buyers and their agent met Richard and I at the house. We literally put the deal together at the kitchen table, right? The whole thing took us like 20 minutes to do. And then afterwards, the buyer's agent, the husband, and I were standing out in the driveway of the house. Meeting was over. We'd inked out the deal. It was all done. We're standing there just kind of talking. And as we're talking, kind of getting ready to leave, we realized that the wife and Richard were still back inside the house. So I mean, it wasn't weird or anything. We're just like, oh, we're not, they're still talking. So we walked back into the house. And when we walked in, Richard and the wife, Taylor, both of them were crying. And they had obviously just hugged right before we walked in. They're both weeping. Turns out she was emotional because her dream of having a home where her kids would be playing around in this big, beautiful backyard was coming true. Richard was emotional because he realized that when he and Shelley had bought the house, they had one daughter at that time too. And the idea for him that 20 years later, history was going to be repeating itself in his house was emotionally moving to him. Obviously, it didn't hurt that he's putting about 800 grand in his pocket when it was all said and done. But that's what was going on. So what this does, that little story of Richard and Taylor and her husband, I think his name was Joshua, it also demonstrates that there are significant secondary benefits of doing the offer presentation in person beyond just dollars and details, right? You've got human beings interacting face to face. And human beings face to face are three-dimensional, right? It's not just a name on a phone in a PDF. And this is what I call cancellation insurance. There were a few things that came up after we put this deal together, having to do with the inspection and some other issues, right? But imagine the context that we had to deal with those issues, resolving them when the last meeting, everybody was hugging and crying together. It's a totally different animal as a way to start the escrow process. And it made it so much easier. So the whole goal with this offer environment problem with the solution, the goal of the offer isn't just to get the signatures on the contract. That's just the first step going all the way to closing. To get more money, to make the whole process faster, and then to start the final closing process on the best footing possible, you need to require that your offers on your home are done in person, just like that. That's strategy number 5. Now, another thing as we wrap up the time, another thing I want to mention about these strategies, I want you to think about all of them like they are ingredients in a recipe, okay? They're not standalone different items. Just like with the recipe, you've got to use all the ingredients. You can't just, not use sugar because you didn't want to this time. Your cookies are going to be terrible. You got to use all of the ingredients. You got to use them in the right amounts, and you got to use them in the right sequence. Okay. And here's why this recipe analogy works is all of these strategies, they work together. They stack up on top of one another, and those increase leverage and influence. Okay. And the end result is you have a change in perception about the way the buyer sees and experiences your house and the price, and a change in the way the agent experiences it, the way the offer itself is presented, the way you're experienced as just being their agent and not just trying to put a deal together. This is a new way of thinking about things, and this is a pro-level way of thinking about things. Because what happens when you use them all together is that fundamentally they all work together to solve the big unknown question that you have as a seller. And that big unknown question is, what is going on with the buyers in the market? What is important to these buyers in the market? And how can I influence them? You actually are never going to know. As I pointed out at the very beginning, their agent may not know. They may not even know. So the strategies are kind of like a shotgun, right? Multiple shots in a pattern to hit all of these different targets. But the targets you actually can't see, and you might not ever know which of those was the actual most important target and how close you hit it to the bullseye. So what you have to do is you've got to put all of the strategies in play, put them all into play in the correct way, all the way to the very end. This is the way you get the buyer to perceive your home at the level that you want. And you notice, in my 5 strategies, I'm not talking about a specific listing price or negotiating strategies or anything like that. Those are important, and with all of my clients, we get that discussion too. But those things are secondary to the work and the positioning required to even get us up to the point where price is even a topic, okay? And then lastly, another thing I want to touch on here, a phrase that you've heard me say, you may have seen it on my social media, don't be a passenger, okay? It's kind of the tagline for House Advantage. And not being a passenger, to me, is an important concept in clearly separating a pro-level seller from anybody else. A pro-level home seller, they actually take control of their own journey. They have their own plan laid out in advance. They know the steps that they want to take and to make sure that they're followed. And this is why a pro-level seller can actually work with any real estate agent they choose, because they're the ones that are driving. The average home seller, your competition in the marketplace, they're not driving, they're a passenger. They're a passenger either for the agent that they hired, or they're a passenger to their own assumptions about what should be happening. And those assumptions are usually a version of, I've done this before, or I've done my research and I think I'm good. That's passenger thinking. Passengers do not pick the destination, and they do not pick the route. And that's why my goal for you is for you to sell like a pro and not just be a passenger. So where do you go from here? What do we do now? Okay, this is great. So there are 2 things that I want to make sure that you take away from today. Number 1, selling smarter isn't just put your home on the market and hope to negotiate. It's about positioning your home correctly and setting up an entire process so a buyer can clearly recognize it. So the number 1 is position the home and the process, and to do it correctly. That's the first thing you need to do. Position your home and your process. Number 1 takeaway. And then number 2, this is simple. Don't be Don't be a passenger. Take control of your own home buying journey. Please. So the question from this then is, so how ready are you to do this? How ready are you to position your home in the process? How ready are you to not be a passenger? So this here is why I created a free 4-minute real estate readiness assessment. It is going to help you see where you are strong, where you may have gaps, and how prepared you are to actually sell like a pro in today's marketplace. How ready you are versus whether you're just going to be operating like a passenger. 4 minutes into it, once you finish this assessment, you'll have a much clearer picture of where you stand and then what deserves your attention next. It's completely free. If you click on the link below, or I've put it in the chat here for you on the live, you go to houseadvantage.com. Let me write it here. H-A-U-S, my last name. Go to houseadvantage.com. Right there at the top, it says readiness assessment. Literally no cost. It'll take you 4 minutes. Okay. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I want you to position your home to be the one that the buyer wants to choose. I want you to take control of your journey, and I do not want you to be a passenger. Thanks for watching.